You're listening to Eating for Eden, Episode 7. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. 6 episodes in, I have not yet said much about my credentials. Here in the 7th episode of Eating for Eden, I think it's important to take a little step back and address 2 questions. Who am I? And why am I the host of a podcast about food and climate action? First, by who am I mean, what are my credentials? While I do have a PhD, it is not in the sciences. I don't have formal training in environmental or climate science, nor do I have a degree in anything related to nutrition. I do, however, love to learn, and I am a nerd when it comes to both nutrition and care for the planet. I'm also an avid and creative home chef. I feel confident in the kitchen and regularly come up with new and delicious plant-based recipes. So even though I am not trained as an expert with regard to food and climate action, I care deeply about it and learn about it voraciously. I'm also eager to share what I learn with others. Back to my education. My PhD is in theology. While that may not initially seem very relevant to the topic of climate change, my formal training gives me a unique edge that I think can be broken down into 3 distinct factors. First, I have a robust understanding of stewardship. Stewardship is a rich, multifaceted theme core to humanity, and it is deeply theological in nature. The parts of stewardship most relevant to this podcast are stewardship of creation and of our bodies. Caring about stewardship and having a robust understanding of its importance leads to faithful climate action, as well as caring for the health of our bodies, not to mention the love of neighbor by caring for the most vulnerable around the world, that is, those who are most affected and earliest affected by climate change. Second, I have learned how to think critically. This includes sorting through various voices and sources of content and weighing evidence. During my dozen or so years of higher education, I was taught how to think, how to read, evaluate arguments, think carefully, how to come to my own conclusions, craft responses in writing, and so forth. The professors I learned from did not seek to indoctrinate me. Instead, I was taught a diversity of viewpoints and the reasons others might hold those viewpoints. I was given the tools to develop my own ability to think and evaluate carefully, drawing conclusions after careful study. With the advent and spread of social media and all manner of changes in the news cycle and how information is available on the internet, so much of the content we encounter is hyped up, overly politicized, and sometimes even downright miscommunicated in order to foster doubt, confusion, and division. Through my years of study, I've developed a careful eye. While I'm certainly not perfect, and honestly, who is? I ask about the reputability of what I'm reading and hearing. I look at the sources. I look to the actual experts to see how they are interpreting the data. I seek to understand where bias is present and how it is affecting the messages being spread, always bringing my hard-won critical thinking to the table as I evaluate content and plan these episodes. Third, I can take heady, theoretical concepts and make them both accessible and actionable for the people. Theology has a lot in common with a field like philosophy. Many people find such topics of study difficult and relatively inaccessible, fields reserved for conversations among fellow experts. And I think the sciences could be the same way. But I am passionate about making such heady conversations accessible to the layperson, the non-expert. I've done this for years with theology in a variety of ways, largely through writing and some teaching. This transferable skill, I might even say this passion, of making complex things simpler to understand and clearly relevant and applicable to daily life is essential to a podcast like this, which aims to make a food-first approach to climate action both make sense and easy to act on. As a non-expert with regard to the topic of this podcast, I'm learning right along with you. And since I'm probably a few steps ahead, I get to share what I'm learning. I think it's important to hang a lantern on this fact because it helps you as a listener to know what to expect from me. There are far too many people out there creating hyped up content who either think they know or even blatantly pretend to know more than they do about what they talk about. Just search the term Dunning-Kruger effect to get an idea of what I'm talking about here. These content creators and quote influencers lure people in with flashy headlines and strong claims. They speak with a strong sense of conviction, aiming to instill in their viewers a sense of competence. These folks, however, rarely exhibit a dash of humility. The more I have read and listened to true experts in their fields, the more I have come to recognize the humility present in their statements. As much as they can and may be able to affirm, they are experts after all, they rarely use terms like, we are certain and without a doubt, or even saying things like always and never, which are commonly thrown out by non-experts, interestingly enough. Even though I am also a non-expert, I want to follow the lead of the experts. If they are making claims with humility, I want to reflect that same humility, expressing what we can say with relative certainty and being clear about what we don't yet know. In a future episode, I'll plan to dive into how to spot pseudoscience and what kinds of yellow and red flags to keep an eye out for, so stay tuned for that. But the point of me sharing my background, what I've been trained in and what I haven't been trained in, is to show you, my listener, that I care very much about sharing accurate information with you all. And I'm seeking to learn from and share the findings of experts in these fields. I'm also hoping to bring some on as guests from time to time so that you do get to hear from experts. So that's something to look forward to. Okay, so that's a bit about me. Now, why this podcast? Why am I the host of a podcast about food and climate action? In short, I care, it matters, and someone had to do it. In addition to having a robust understanding of stewardship, moving beyond a sheer sense of duty, this topic is near and dear to my heart. You might call it a passion of mine. I've nerded out on nutrition over the past few years and gradually added in environmental matters as well. I've come to realize how vital both are for global health, and both are inseparable from another love of mine, food. In our cultural milieu, imminent action is necessary. Climate change is real, it's caused by us, and we can do something about it. While we need everyone to be involved, from individuals to businesses and nonprofits to governments and entire nations, the place to start is with our own individual actions. We can't sit around and wait for policy changes. While governmental and multinational policies are going to be important, it also matters to get started right here, right now, with the things over which we have agency. There are already so many outlets, podcasts and otherwise, focused on nutrition. Plus, as a non-expert, I figured I wouldn't have much value to offer there. Thus, I knew a nutrition podcast was not the way for me to go. While nutrition will certainly find its way into episodes here, it's not the main focus. The more I learned about ideas and opportunities for climate action, however, I continued to be stunned that there were not more resources out there talking about what we could do about our daily meals, our food. I knew food was a massive contributor to global warming, and thus it was also a huge opportunity. Wedding my love of food with the desire to offer something meaningful and practical to the world, I decided to fill that gap. The world needs to eat with our modern-day Eden in mind. We live in a beautiful, massive garden that we've in many ways failed to care for well. It's time to look at our individual actions, starting with our plates, and make a difference one meal at a time. I'm so grateful that you're tuning in to Eating for Eden. The previous episodes have a number of practical action steps you can take today to start making a difference. I hope you'll give those a listen if you haven't yet done so. In addition, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, please subscribe and consider leaving a review. These actions will help others to find this content and begin taking meaningful action as well. Also, don't forget to share Eating for Eden with a friend. As climate scientist Katherine Hayhoe said in her TED Talk, the most important thing we can do about climate change is talk about it. So let's do that. Let's start where we are, do what we can, and build from there. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, so let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, take care.